2016. And it's been just such a paradigm shift. There's such a vibe shift here. Because, I mean, in 2016, nobody expected him to win. There was a massive resistance movement. And there were a lot of people celebrating, but there was also a lot of negative energy that was flooding the city at that time, like in the form of the Women's March. It's totally the reverse this time. I think nobody was really that shocked when Kamala lost, so the sort of reaction, the negative reaction, isn't there in the same way. And his supporters it's a mob scene everywhere. Yeah. Everyone is having fun. Everyone is celebrating. I mean, you can't even keep track of all the different events that are happening. And it's just been a vibe shift, I guess, to speak in the Zoomer, language. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Like, the subway has been completely packed with MAGA hats, and there's not even like the pushback or adverse reaction to your point. And I actually hadn't even thought of that. Like, there are no counter protesters or counter demonstrations. Like, there is almost entirely just positive energy. I have not seen a single
protester.
Yeah,
which is incredible.
I've seen one person with a megaphone that seemed like she was off to do something, but like that is remarkable. That is it. In contrast,
a couple of token nuts.
Yeah, but like a lot of disappointed people too, because it was supposed to be outside and you were supposed to be able to see it, and now it is indoors.
Well, officially, obviously, it's because the weather forced them indoors. It was predicted to be a historically cold day today, though. Actually, not that cold. I went out without my coat.
Not so bad,
but we are seeing a very interesting situation unfolding in the Capitol Rotunda right now, because basically the attendees inside the Capitol have been sort of culled to only the most VIP, creme de la creme people in Washington. So you're seeing them.
As they're speaking,
on
Joe
screen.
Biden and Kamala Harris are walking in.
Yep. And I already know all of the former presidents have taken their seat. We saw Barack Obama come in a minute ago, George W. Bush come in a minute ago, and members of the Supreme Court have also taken their seats, as well as Trump's cabinet. And I saw several elite donors as well who managed to make the cut. Miriam Adelson, the wife of the late casino magnate Sheldon Adelson, took her seat right next to Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles. Elon Musk, of course, is there.
Of course.
So, and now there is someone singing. I'm not sure who that is, but J.D. Vance is walking in now.
Yeah, and notably not in attendance is Michelle Obama. No official reason quite yet. She was also not at Carter's funeral, and Nancy Pelosi also not in attendance.
Right. The continuing mystery about where Michelle Obama is. This is her second major event that she skipped. Obviously, President Obama put out a photo of them, allegedly a happy couple, at some kind of undisclosed basement wine cellar dinner that they had. There are a lot of questions about Michelle Obama and, why we haven't seen her.
Yes.
And hopefully, at some point that'll be put to bed. I'll also note that we have a lot of other major magnets here that we haven't seen before in presidential inaugurations, sort of so close to power. People like Jeff Bezos, our head of Amazon, Sundar Pichai, the head of Microsoft, and also Shochu, the head of TikTok.
Which is very strange
to
see.
Yes, and TikTok actually had a
party
gala last night on the day they were supposed to be banned. They had and Taylor Lorenz was there.
They are still back, right? Taylor Lorenz was there in a
double-studded mask, and she was.
Of course.
It was this weird kind of radical chic confluence where she was taking photos with all these Trump people. But, it's incredible. I mean, again, as it goes back to what I said earlier, the vibe and the energy is totally different. And clearly TikTok is feeling very, very confident coming into the beginning days of the Trump administration.
What do you think the motivation is for Trump to be so ardently pro-TikTok? Like, I just can't quite figure out
It's
why.
kind of an open question, because he obviously was very against TikTok in the first term, and he did try to ban it himself. And the TikTok ban was very bipartisan in Congress. It was widely supported by both parties, and no one thought it would get done. It got done, and then President Biden signed it, and it was done. And the incoming president decided to put that issue back on the agenda. And there's several possible reasons, but there isn't a clear answer. And I think it's something that we're going to probably learn more about in the weeks and months ahead. How far is he willing to go to sort of save this app?
I mean, it's one thing to save it. It's another thing to also go as far as to invite the CEO to the inauguration.
Right.
That was surprising to me.
Now, you are a Zoomer, strictly speaking.
Strictly
How
speaking.
important is TikTok for Zoomers?
I mean, Not at all to me, except for it is helpful in research. I was actually kind of bummed because it is a great search engine in a way. Like if you want to find a trend or something, or you search like some terrible thing that's going on right now socially, like you will find a million people doing something awful somehow in a way that you can't on any other social media. Like it is a unique tool.
When you talk to other Zoomers, are they devastated?
Not people that I'm friends with, but I know a lot of people are. Apparently, people have been calling 911 about TikTok going down.
There have been emergencies?
There have been actually like a record number of 911 calls or something about the issue. But I know a lot of people are upset about it, and I think a lot of people didn't believe that it was going to happen. But like it seems to be a very temporary thing, and I think that everyone's just kind of like, well, Trump's coming, and it's going to be fine. So
now
Trump's popular with Zoomers for this reason.
I love it. He's
the savior of TikTok.
It's been a little jujitsu, a little triangulation, as the Clinton types might call it. So we're about 25 minutes away from Trump taking the oath of office.
Also,
that'll be
look
administered.
at Melania's hat. That's
she's
quite
iconic.
a statement.
What do you make of that?
I just think she's beautiful, and it's a beautiful hat. It just looks very somber. I don't know. It doesn't look.
It's a statement.
It's not celebratory.
Fashion's not my area. So I don't.
No,
it's definitely
it's
a statement.
beautiful, and she looks very beautiful. I'll give her that for sure. She's always a very underrated first lady, in my opinion. She does not get the credit she deserves. She had some like 10 out of 10 outfits that I feel like never really got the moments that they should have had. But
so the new administration, which will take office in about 25 minutes, has been promising a blizzard of executive action in the next days and weeks ahead. And that sort of legislation is very hard and complicated, but executive orders are very easy. They have about 100, perhaps, or 200 even ready to go. He just has to go to the Oval Office once he's sworn in and sign them. What can we sort of expect on the executive order front in the first 24 hours and first week?
Well, potentially some January 6th pardons coming down the pipeline here. He kind of broadly is saying that he aims to do some things that will end the weaponization of the Justice Department. What form that will take exactly remains to be seen. Potentially some stuff related to the LA fire relief and sending assistance out that way. Changes to Title IX, reversing what Biden did to change the term sex to gender identity and reverting that back to its original form. So you're protecting the female sex category rather than people who identify as women, et cetera. And then energy and immigration are two big categories as well, of course, if there are any specifics that...
Well, I mean, the big one for me is there's going to be, I'm told, a big shutdown, essentially a border emergency that will allow the president to shut down the border.
Declaration of national emergency.
And I think, one of the reasons he obviously won is during the Biden administration, we saw almost 10 million people come into the United States illegally. And in New York City, where we live, that has taken the form of tent cities popping up on places like Randall's Island. It's taken the form of migrants living in luxury hotels at taxpayer expense, being given prepaid credit cards by our mayor, who is in D.C. today, seeking, I don't know what from President Trump, but he's here. So
getting his eyebrows done?
The immigration, maybe. The immigration issue is a major issue why he won. In addition to inflation, where there might be executive orders there as well. I don't know. It remains to be seen. And also the 51 security officials who said the Hunter Biden laptop was disinformation, they will be losing their security clearance as well. Oh, and Mount McKinley, now known as Denali in Alaska, the name will be returned to Mount McKinley. So issues large and small are going to be tackled. And the Gulf of Mexico will now be called the Gulf of America. We can't forget that as well. So a lot is happening. And on Jan 6 pardons, I'll also say it's unclear, is it going to be, one of the big outstanding questions there is it going to be a pardon for everyone who was caught up in January 6th, or who's going to actually get one and who's going to remain in prison? Because as J.D. Vance has even said, there were some people who were, violent on that day.
Against police officers is a whole
violence against cops, and that's very well documented. And I'm curious how sweeping it'll actually be, and I'm very curious, sort of the Jan 6ers who are going to make the cut and the ones who will not. So that remains to be seen in the minutes ahead or the hours ahead.
Absolutely. Well, and also that's the sort of thing that he could do, like a first sweep of, and then that could continue more and more and more over time as well.
Right. So, really, in many ways, Rikki, this is iconic because I remember not just him winning in 2016, but I also remember him losing in 2020. And I remember him sort of going into the wilderness at Mar-a-Lago, and I remember everyone talking about the future, you know, whether that would be DeSantis, whether that would be Nikki Haley, whether that would be who knows who. And then he was charged, the first criminal charges came down in New York City with Alvin Bragg.
Yeah.
And what's your recollection of that? You know, that was sort of a pivot point where his polls started to shoot up and people started to, he was left for dead, but then everyone gave him a second look.
I mean, I think that certainly that all kind of backfired because it felt like it was a weaponization of the justice or the criminal justice against the president. I mean, I think that it made him, even for people, like to your point, who might not have been fans of him, they became more skeptical of the government or at least the treatment of him in a new and renewed way. So I think it actually ended up ultimately benefiting him, even though perhaps it made him a little more angry and vindictive, character-wise, I would say. I mean, that's
what people need to understand. Who are watching this is the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is an elected official. Letitia James, our Attorney General of the State of New York, is an elected official, and these people run on campaigns of holding Trump accountable. And it's more about, well, get us elected, and it's like, what are you going to charge him with? Well, we'll figure that out later.
But absolutely.
Charging him and prosecuting him becomes a campaign promise.
Absolutely.
And then it gets into this almost Soviet, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. So they were faced with the incentive to prosecute him to fulfill a campaign promise, like lowering or raising taxes.
Absolutely. I mean, Letitia James, I think, is the most egregious on that front. By far. She went hunting for that. It was completely motivated.
Absolutely. So,
and we also just have Trump walking in here as well.
Trump is now he's shaking hands with Melania. That's Melania's father. Who he's shaking hands with, standing next to J.D. Vance. You see Jeff Bezos in the background there. Doug Burgum, there's Barron Trump, who's a head taller than his father. Barron's almost 6'8", 6'9". Behind him is Doug Burgum. He's tall. Because Trump is like 6'6", 6'7". So it's a who's who of who's in here. And by the way, the overflow crowd is in the Capital One Arena, which is obviously not the same as watching it live. And then a lot of people are filtered out into different watch parties across D.C. today because obviously, no one just wants to sit at home in their hotel room alone. So everyone's found a place to watch it. What are some of the issues, Rikki, that you think were integral to Trump sort of putting this away and that he really campaigned on and won on? Like, you know about like wokeness and DEI and sort of the wedge issues that he hit on?
I mean, I think actually, weirdly, the thing that really did it for him was the Biden campaign's insistence that he was fine in the gaslighting. Like, I actually think that potentially had they had a primary election or admitted the truth and not just insisted that you can't believe your lying eyes, that the president is completely incompetent and can't string a sentence together or debate. Like, I actually think that is that a lot of people broke for Trump because they just did not appreciate the media, all of the Democratic politicians going and saying, no, it's fine. In all my meetings with him, he's running laps around me. And it's like, seriously, like everyone's going to really carry water for it. I think that truly for a lot of people.
It's part of a pattern of gaslighting. I mean, one of the central themes of Biden and then later the Harris campaign was that, Trump is going to prosecute his political enemies. And yet the fact of the matter is we heard lock her up in the first term. And then is Hillary Clinton in prison? I don't think so. And yet at the same time, the Biden administration has been actively trying to jail their chief political opponent for years, and so that's one of the main sort of contradictions. So now we see who's at the podium here. This is Senator Amy Klobuchar, a one-time presidential candidate herself, very famous for eating salad with a comb. You can Google that. Oh yeah, you Google that. All right, so we're going to listen into what she's saying now. So let's see what Amy has to say.
Under pressure. Our theme this year is our enduring democracy. The presence of so many presidents and vice presidents here today is truly a testament to that endurance. We welcome President Biden and Dr. Biden. We welcome Vice President Harris and Doug Emhoff, President Obama, President Clinton and Secretary Clinton, President Bush and Laura Bush, Vice President Pence, Vice President Quayle and Marilyn Quayle. The justices of the United States Supreme Court are with us, all 9 of them I counted, and of course the Trump and Vance families. This ceremony marks what will soon be 250 years of our democracy. It is the moment when leaders, elevated by the will of the people, promise to be faithful to our Constitution, to cherish and defend it. It is the moment when they become, as we all should be, the guardians of our country. Through war and peace, through adversity and prosperity, we hold this inauguration every 4 years, and today it falls on Martin Luther King Day. A further reminder that we must strive to uphold the values enshrined in our Constitution, the freedoms, the liberties, and, as is inscribed on the entrance of the United States Supreme Court, equal justice under law. But what makes this moment more than a passing ceremony is all who are watching it across the country, the people of this nation, the ordinary people doing extraordinary things. President Kennedy, who at one point worked as a senator in this building and would often walk through this very rotunda, once said, "In a democracy, every citizen, regardless of interest in politics, holds office. Every one of us is in a position of responsibility." With that responsibility of citizenship comes an obligation not to seek out malice, as President Lincoln once reminded us, but to view others with a generosity of spirit despite our differences. With that responsibility of leadership comes an obligation to stand our ground when we must and find common ground when we can. With everything swirling around us, the hot mess of division, it is on all of us, to quote an incredible songwriter who just happened to be born in my state, to ensure that our nation's democracy is our shelter from the storm. There's a reason this ceremony takes place at the Capitol. In other countries, it might be in a presidential palace or a gilded executive office building. Here, it is traditionally held at the Capitol, the People's House. It is a fitting reminder of the system of checks and balances that is the very foundation of our government, 3 equal branches of government. That is how, for nearly 250 years, our great American experiment, grounded in the rule of law, has endured. So, as we inaugurate a new president and vice president, let us remember that the power of those in this room comes from the people. The construction workers who build our country, the teachers and healthcare workers who nurture us, the troops defending our freedoms, and yes, the firefighters in Los Angeles putting themselves on the line for us. Our democracy's strength and grit must match theirs. May God bless our nation. Thank you.
So, John, one thing that's very interesting is traditionally foreign leaders are not involved in inaugurations.
No,
but
they
Trump
are not.
went kind of crazy with the invites this time, including Xi Jinping of China, who did not come. He sent like a lower down
a Chinese vice president met with Vance yesterday.
Yeah. But Javier Milei is here. Giorgia Meloni is here. Reportedly, Viktor Orban said no or could not attend.
I know the leader of El Salvador was invited, Bukele. I'm not sure if he made it or not. And also, the former president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, was invited as well. And he wanted to come, but he is currently under prosecution in his country. Something sounds found familiar. And they're not giving him a visa to travel here. So he's trapped in Brazil, but he wants to make a comeback as well. And something I think is a lot more likely now that Trump will occupy the White House.
And so what do you make about that move? Like, why do you think he's made this decision to go so international?
It's definitely a precedent-shattering move. As you said, we don't generally have foreign leaders at American inaugurations. And I'm aware there was a scramble of foreign leaders who wanted to come, because once you open the door, suddenly the president of, like, Nigeria, suddenly the president of Nicaragua is saying, well, hey, what about me? What about me? So I know that the foreign service agents in this town, the legal ones, not like Hunter Biden, the ones who register with the Foreign Agent Registration Act, they were getting a lot of calls from their clients. Hey, this king, this dictator, this general, hey, can I get in? Can I get in? And for the most of them, the answer was no. Actually, it was even among heads of state, it was a very, very tight guest list. And to your original question, I think Trump is trying to project that the United States is willing to work with these people. These are countries that we have strategic relationships with and partnerships with, and obviously China is the number 2 nation in the world right now, and we need to have a good relationship with them, and we need to have productive relationships with them. And from what you read, Trump and Xi Jinping have a good relationship. It's a working relationship. There's been tensions, obviously, but it's something that it's an olive branch, not a stick, at the beginning of the term, which I think is very appropriate and very wise.
Mm-hmm. And another, obviously, very large faction and new sort of group that's in this address as well is the tech world that is very heavily overrepresented. As we mentioned, Zuckerberg, Musk, Bezos have all been in D.C. and around Trump's circles recently. Oh, yeah. What do you make of their kind of descent on Washington and what their influence will be?
Well, I think they're reading the tea leaves. I think their finger is in the wind, and I think they understand, this time around President Trump won the popular vote. It was a more commanding on every measure victory than in 2016. And they recognize that the regime of censorship and persecution of people that weren't, ideologically in step with all the woke agenda kind of backfired. And it wasn't what the American people wanted, and it wasn't something that was working. And I think this country works best when we get back to our roots, which is people have free expression. And they have free expression as we do here in this newsroom, but also it's what you want to post on Facebook, what you want to post on Twitter. I think Elon buying Twitter was also a major sort of vibe shift where he he was the first to be like, we are gonna reverse this tide of less speech and more censorship, and we're gonna go back to just let it roll. And there's gonna be some crazy stuff, because that's how it goes with free expression. But we're just going to let it roll. And I think a lot of tech CEOs looked at that and are now following his lead. And they see where Elon is now, and they're following his lead. So it's I don't know that it's necessarily like anyone's had a come to Jesus moment. I think a lot of them just see their bottom line works best when they support free speech.
Yeah, fair enough. And what are your predictions for the content of Trump's?
Well, that's a big one, because like Vivian and Rikki, I know both of us are veterans of Trump rallies and speeches across the country, and I've heard a lot of Trump speeches in my life, and they can be unwieldy, and they can be, sort of, the moment when you see the teleprompter stop, and he's just going. I think we'll see a much more disciplined speech this time around. I think you're going to see a lot of discussion on the big issues, immigration, fixing the immigration situation, the economy, fixing inflation. Real prices, Rikki, are up 19% since President Biden took office. I mean, you take away all the woke cultural issues that he ran on, that's a real amount of money. And I feel like part of the problem with maybe the leaders on both parties and the elite media is they're not necessarily price conscious to that. So they don't view a 19% increase in the cost of food as a big deal, because someone like Joe Scarborough doesn't worry about food getting more expensive. But, ordinary Americans do, and it is a major, major increase. And I don't think any president could have won with headwinds like that, woke issues or no woke issues. So I think we'll hear that. I think we'll hear more about the executive orders that are on coming down the pipe. That's obviously a new development that we'll get because he's president now. We didn't hear that in the rallies necessarily. I think we'll hear a lot of what he said in the rally yesterday, but in a more formalized sort of way. And, there'll be surprises because it's Trump. I don't know. Maybe there'll be some ad-libbing. Maybe there'll be, and he has a taste for the theatrical.
This is true.
I remember when he was doing the State of the Union and just gave Rush Limbaugh a Presidential Medal of Freedom, in the first term. So I think, taking away what I've learned since he came on the scene, I think he'll want to work in some surprises too that I won't even hazard to predict right now.
I do agree, though. I think this will probably be a more disciplined performance than most of his in the past. And I think hopefully this will be a moment to kind of like rise to the occasion because he has been vindicated.
Right.
And he has signaled so far in the interviews that he has done both with Meet the Press and ABC about what to expect with the inaugural address. He said unity, strength, and fairness are the themes that he expects to touch on. He told Meet the Press last month that we're going to have a message that will make you happy, unity. It's going to be a message of unity, and I think success brings unity. And, you know, I think a fair critique of Trump's leadership style is that it is divisive and can anger a lot of people and pull people apart.
There was an incredible poll done, a New York Times poll, about how Trump's policies and ideas are far more popular than the man himself.
Yes.
And how even, you know, large numbers of Democrats don't want biological men playing in women's sports. Large number of Democrats want the mass deportations, and they think, you know, the lawlessness at the border has become very, very, you know, dangerous. And we've already seen one illegal migrant arrested in response to the LA fire situation. And God only knows what other tragedies are on the horizon from people who have no right to legally be here. And support for these policies is much higher than where Trump is. And I think one of the challenges for him is going to be getting himself and his approval ratings up to, you know, where all of his ideas are. Because it's, you know, when he doesn't have the same level of support, it drags down his political capital and his ability to move those issues over the finish line. So that's going to be one of the big challenges. And I think there has been, he's a very different man than he was in 16. I mean, in 16, let's be frank, he didn't have a playbook for this. He was kind of winging it in a way where, you know, no one had any government experience. He had a very hard time finding qualified, competent people early, and there were a lot of early missteps, and there were a lot of things that were challenged in the courts. I remember, you know, the Muslim ban, for example, which had to be called the travel ban on terror-prone countries, but there were a lot of early missteps. That won't happen this time. These executive orders, I can tell you, have been vetted by teams of lawyers. Stephen Miller, an incoming deputy chief of staff, has been in charge of that process. And I think you're going to see much more discipline, much more effective legislating that is sort of follows, you know, checks all the legal boxes. And, you know, someone said to me the other night, there's going to be sort of a flood the zone approach where, okay, there's going to be court challenges, but we're going to flood the zone. So we're going to disorient our enemies. We're going to just give them so much that they can't sort of knock down everything. Another one is ending birthright citizenship. What do you think of that?
You know, I think that's a complex one because that is a very entrenched right in the country. I'm not entirely sure how that really works necessarily.
It remains to be sort of seen, you know, the implementation. I mean, everything, the devil is always in the details. It's one thing to sign a piece of paper. It's another thing, how is this going to work logistically? And, you know, I think in some cases, they're actually hoping for legal action. Because, okay, so we sign the thing saying no birthright citizenship anymore. That will prompt, obviously, a lawsuit immediately. And I think he's looking for a fight on that issue. Because I think the Trump team, on a lot of these issues, is calculating that it will go to the Supreme Court, and they have a conservative majority there, many of whom he nominated.
Like we have Vance being sworn in here.
Oh, is J.D. Vance being sworn in? Okay, let's go to J.D. Vance being sworn in.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith.
That I will bear true faith.
And allegiance to the same.
And allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation.
Without any mental reservation.
Or purpose of evasion.
Or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office.
The duties of the office.
On which I am about to enter.
On which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Vice President.
Please welcome Chief Justice Roberts to administer the presidential oath of office.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Is now President of the United States. So we don't have to write President-elect anymore.
Yeah.
And President Biden is now former President Biden, and we are seeing the beginning of the next 4 years. This is the capstone of an iconic comeback. You know, won the first term, lost the second term, January 6th, the legal troubles. We were looking at the rest of his life potentially in prison from some of these prosecutions, and he's come back. And I don't think it's less a two-term president and more an era that we're living in. And it's an era that began when he came down the golden escalator in 2015, and it's going to run through till 2028. And we're going to call it the Trump era. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a striking image, too, because you have the setup of Trump and his family on the left side of the screen, and then Joe Biden and Kamala Harris right next to each other, too. It's just really an end of an era on the right there. It's quite something, and really, I think an indictment on politics gone too far on that side. That I think a lot of people also voted for Trump, perhaps not so much because they were so in love with him or his policies, but just because they were so sick of what was going on in Washington until then. And so it really is stark to look at both sides. And it seems we have is this the Navy that's performing? Some musical?
Yeah, it could be.
Performance? Yeah, it seems to be the Navy.
It's funny how, Trump is always so Trumpy. Like, and
he's pointing right after
he takes the oath, and then Chief Justice shakes his hand and he does one of those.
Of course, there's got to be a little bit of something.
There is always an element
some personality
of New York City real estate like stickiness to him, and that I think we're going to definitely see more of that. And something we haven't talked about yet is he's now survived 2 assassination attempts. And including one where he was literally shot in the head, and came within, a quarter of an inch of death, and 2 people were killed right behind him. Or one person was killed, another
2
person
critically
was injured.
Yeah.
And, people I know who know him have said he has changed. He has become, there's a much more like broad-mindedness, and there's a much more, I don't want to say dignified, but more presidential, if you will. Like he's a much different figure. He's a much more relaxed figure, and I think he's enjoying it much more this time around than he did the first time around. I think I think the energy for him is very different. I think because I think they really feel like they're in the driver's seat this time, where they know what they're doing. They feel like they got a very good team. They're hiring people at a much more rapid clip. You know, on the
there seems to be institutional power behind them in a way too. That there just wasn't in 2016.
Like the first time around, you were constantly fighting against everybody on every front, and you had the whole deep state, you know, at you. These entrenched bureaucrats that hate your guts day one. You know, and on that issue, another big executive order that's coming is he's going to try to remove civil service protections for federal workers, which is one of the biggest sort of holy grail, sacred cow issues in D.C. because this is a federal worker town. You get these lifetime jobs in like Department of Agriculture, and you never ever leave, and you kind of just become the deep state. And one of the things they're going to try to do is move. They're going to create a new categorization of a federal worker. It's going to be called Schedule F. And they're going to try to move workers onto this where they'll be treated just like any normal employees, at-will employees. You do a good job, you get promoted. If you don't do a good job, then maybe you have to find a different job. And hopefully it's going to be a transformation of the federal government to operate more like a private company and a private business where like its performance and merit have value. Whereas the current system where if you have a job, it's just a lifetime job and that's it. And you live and die in it, whether or not it's obsolete, whether or not you're doing anything of value, whether or not you have any relevant skills, you know. And that might have worked in the 19th century when life didn't change much year to year, decade to decade. But, you know, if we want to be competitive, we have to have a competitive federal government, no question.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think about, on that note too, with DOGE, do you think that they're going to be as effective as they expect that they're going to be, tearing things down and burning them down? I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of roadblocks in the way to actually achieving what they hope to do. But I mean, that seems to be a step in the right direction, at least in terms of cutting down some excesses in Washington, which we have plenty of.
Ronald Reagan famously said that the closest you can get to immortality is a government agency. So it's, and he said that in the context of, I'm going to cut these things, and government grew throughout Reagan's term, as it has under every president since Reagan. It's one of the most difficult, impossible, everyone says they're going to do it, and they never do it, tasks. And yet, you know, I think they do have a real shot, and there's nothing Elon and Vivek can do, by the way, like, you know, they can't sign executive orders. What I think is going to be the process, they're going to go in sort of like McKinsey consultants, and they're going to go into the different agencies and be like, we don't need this department is unnecessary, we can consolidate this department, this person hasn't even done anything in 30 years. But, you know, the big picture on government spending is it's mostly the military, entitlements, and actually payments on our interest payments on existing debt, which is horrifying to think of.
Absolutely.
Because then pretty soon we're going to be borrowing money just to pay off interest payments, which is really, that's, you know, anyone who has a credit card knows how that goes. All right, the president is now approaching the podium, and we're going to turn it over to him for the rest of his speech. It was great being with you all, so let's see what he's got to say.
Thank you very much, everybody. Well, thank you very, very much. Vice President Vance, Speaker Johnson, Senator Thune, Chief Justice Roberts, Justices of the United States Supreme Court, President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and my fellow citizens. The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. the vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end. And our top priority will be to create a nation that is proud, prosperous, and free. America will soon be greater, stronger, and far more exceptional than ever before. I return to the presidency confident and optimistic that we are at the start of a thrilling new era of national success. A tide of change is sweeping the country, sunlight is pouring over the entire world, and America has the chance to seize this opportunity like never before. But first, we must be honest about the challenges we face. While they are plentiful, they will be annihilated by this great momentum that the world is now witnessing in the United States of America. As we gather today, our government confronts a crisis of trust. For many years, a radical and corrupt establishment has extracted power and wealth from our citizens while the pillars of our society lay broken and seemingly in complete disrepair. We now have a government that cannot manage even a simple crisis at home, while at the same time stumbling into a continuing catalog of catastrophic events abroad. It fails to protect our magnificent, law-abiding American citizens, but provides sanctuary and protection for dangerous criminals, many from prisons and mental institutions that have illegally entered our country from all over the world. We have a government that has given unlimited funding to the defense of foreign borders, but refuses to defend American borders or, more importantly, its own people. Our country can no longer deliver basic services in times of emergency, as recently shown by the wonderful people of North Carolina, been treated so badly. And other states who are still suffering from a hurricane that took place many months ago. Or more recently, Los Angeles, where we're watching fires still tragically burn from weeks ago without even a token of defense. They're raging through the houses and communities, even affecting some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in our country, some of whom are sitting here right now. They don't have a home any longer. That's interesting. But we can't let this happen. Everyone is unable to do anything about it. That's going to change. We have a public health system that does not deliver in times of disaster, yet more money is spent on it than any country anywhere in the world. And we have an education system that teaches our children to be ashamed of themselves in many cases, to hate our country despite the love that we try so desperately to provide to them. All of this will change starting today, and it will change very quickly. My recent election is a mandate to completely and totally reverse a horrible betrayal and all of these many betrayals that have taken place, and to give the people back their faith, their wealth, their democracy, and indeed their freedom. From this moment on, America's decline is over. Our liberties and our nation's glorious destiny will no longer be denied, and we will immediately restore the integrity, competency, and loyalty of America's government. Over the past 8 years, I have been tested and challenged more than any president in our 250-year history, and I've learned a lot along the way. The journey to reclaim our republic has not been an easy one, that I can tell you. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much. That is why each day under our administration of American patriots, we will be working to meet every crisis with dignity and power and strength. We will move with purpose and speed to bring back hope, prosperity, safety, and peace for citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. For American citizens, January 20th, 2025 is Liberation Day. It is my hope that our recent presidential election will be remembered as the greatest and most consequential election in the history of our country. As our victory showed, the entire nation is rapidly unifying behind our agenda with dramatic increases in support from virtually every element of our society, young and old, men and women, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, urban, suburban, rural, and very importantly, we had a powerful win in all 7 swing states, and the popular vote, we won by millions of people. To the Black and Hispanic communities, I want to thank you for the tremendous outpouring of love and trust that you have shown me with your vote. We set records, and I will not forget it. I've heard your voices in the campaign, and I look forward to working with you in the years to come. Today is Martin Luther King Day, and his honor, this will be a great honor, but in his honor we will strive together to make his dream a reality. We will make his dream come true. Thank you. Thank you. National unity is now returning to America, and confidence and pride is soaring like never before. In everything we do, my administration will be inspired by a strong pursuit of excellence and unrelenting success. We will not forget our country, we will not forget our Constitution, and we will not forget our God. Can't do that. Today, I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense. First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. Illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release. And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country. Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And by invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks, bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities. As Commander-in-Chief, I have no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions, and that is exactly what I am going to do. We will do it at a level that nobody's ever seen before. Next, I will direct all members of my cabinet to marshal the vast powers at their disposal to defeat what was record inflation and rapidly bring down costs and prices. The inflation crisis was caused by massive overspending and escalating energy prices, and that is why today I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill. America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again, right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it. With my actions today, we will end the Green New Deal, and we will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers. In other words, you'll be able to buy the car of your choice. We will build automobiles in America again at a rate that nobody could have dreamt possible just a few years ago. And thank you to the auto workers of our nation for your inspiring vote of confidence. We did tremendously with their vote. I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. For this purpose, we are establishing the External Revenue Service to collect all tariffs, duties, and revenues. It will be massive amounts of money pouring into our treasury, coming from foreign sources. The American dream will soon be back and thriving like never before to restore competence and effectiveness to our federal government. My administration will establish the brand new Department of Government Efficiency. After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents, something I know something about. We will not allow that to happen. It will not happen again. Under my leadership, we will restore fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law. And we are going to bring law and order back to our cities. This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay. And I will sign an order to stop our warriors from being subjected to radical political theories and social experiments while on duty. It's going to end immediately. Our armed forces will be freed to focus on their sole mission, defeating America's enemies. Like in 2017, we will again build the strongest military the world has ever seen. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier. I'm pleased to say that as of yesterday, one day before I assumed office, the hostages in the Middle East are coming back home to their families. Thank you. America will reclaim its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, most respected nation on earth, inspiring the awe and admiration of the entire world. A short time from now, we are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and we will restore the name. of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley, where it should be and where it belongs. President McKinley made our country very rich through tariffs and through talent. He was a natural businessman and gave Teddy Roosevelt the money for many of the great things he did, including the Panama Canal, which has foolishly been given to the country of Panama after the United States. The United States, I mean, think of this, spent more money than ever spent on a project before and lost 38,000 lives in the building of the Panama Canal. We have been treated very badly from this foolish gift that should have never been made, and Panama's promise to us has been broken. The purpose of our deal and the spirit of our treaty has been totally violated. American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form, and that includes the United States Navy. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. Above all, my message to Americans today is that it is time for us to once again act with courage, vigor, and the vitality of history's greatest civilization. So as we liberate our nation, we will lead it to new heights of victory and success. We will not be deterred. Together we will end the chronic disease epidemic and keep our children safe, healthy, and disease-free. The United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. Ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation, and right now our nation is more ambitious than any other. There's no nation like our nation. Americans are explorers, builders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and pioneers. The spirit of the frontier is written into our hearts. The call of the next great adventure resounds from within our souls. Our American ancestors turned a small group of colonies on the edge of a vast continent into a mighty republic of the most extraordinary citizens on earth. No one comes close. Americans pushed thousands of miles through a rugged land of untamed wilderness. They crossed deserts, scaled mountains, braved untold dangers, won the Wild West, ended slavery, rescued millions from tyranny, lifted billions from poverty, harnessed electricity, split the atom, launched mankind into the heavens, and put the universe of human knowledge into the palm of the human hand. If we work together, there is nothing we cannot do and no dream we cannot achieve. Many people thought it was impossible for me to stage such a historic political comeback. But as you see today, here I am. The American people have spoken. I stand before you now as proof that you should never believe that something is impossible to do. In America, the impossible is what we do best. From New York to Los Angeles, from Philadelphia to Phoenix, from Chicago to Miami, from Houston to right here in Washington, D.C., our country was forged and built by the generations of patriots who gave everything they had for our rights and for our freedom. They were farmers and soldiers, cowboys and factory workers, steel workers and coal miners, police officers and pioneers who pushed onward, marched forward, and let no obstacle defeat their spirit or their pride. Together they laid down the railroads, raised up the skyscrapers, built great highways, won 2 world wars, defeated fascism and communism, and triumphed over every single challenge that they faced. After all we have been through together, we stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. With your help, we will restore America, promise, and we will rebuild the nation that we love, and we love it so much. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. So to every parent who dreams for their child, and every child who dreams for their future, I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We are going to win like never before. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. In recent years, our nation has suffered greatly, but we are going to bring it back and make it great again, greater than ever before. We will be a nation like no other, full of compassion, courage, and exceptionalism. Our power will stop all wars and bring a new spirit of unity to a world that has been angry, violent, and totally unpredictable. America will be respected again and admired again, including by people of religion, faith, and goodwill. We will be prosperous. We will be proud. We will be strong, and we will win like never before. We will not be conquered. We will not be intimidated. We will not be broken, and we will not fail. From this day on, the United States of America will be a free, sovereign, and independent nation. We will stand bravely. We will live proudly. We will dream boldly, and nothing will stand in our way because we are Americans. The future is ours, and our golden age has just begun. Thank you. God bless America. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, performing America the Beautiful, please welcome the Armed Forces.
The second inaugural address of President Donald Trump, the return to power after some years in the wilderness. And I guess, Rikki, what'd you think?
It was quicker than I thought it was going to be. It was pretty short.
That was the first thing I noticed too. Is we wrapped up in just under 40 minutes. You know, yeah. I'm a veteran of the 2-hour Trump stemwinder.
Yeah.
So this was succinct. It was concise.
It was scripted.
It was
clearly.
scripted. He was reading the prompter.
Yeah.
And I think we got it was a lot of bang for our buck in terms of what's going to happen.
It was very specific. It was not fluffy like generalizations. Yeah. It was highly specific.
Right. I've heard speeches that get into Hannibal Lecter. I've heard speeches that get into Al Capone. We didn't. Yeah. We had what they call good Trump today. Yeah. And we really heard a lot of policy too, a lot of day one actions that have been reported in the press, but you don't know it until he says it or it's truthed out, and now we know it. And I mean, some of them that struck out to me is we're going to revoke the electric vehicle mandate, which I have to wonder what Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla, thinks about that. He promised that the state will not be weaponized against political opponents. This has been a talking point among Democrats forever, that the president would use his office to target political opponents. But he's now promised not to do that. Many other issues. They talked about the woke indoctrination of the military, talked about reclaiming the Panama Canal, about tariffs, many things happening on day one in the succeeding weeks. What do you think? What was most notable for you?
I think the most notable moment was certainly his looking back on his assassination attempt there.
Oh, right.
Saying
Right.
he's saved by God to make America great again.
What do you make of that?
I mean, that was uncharacteristically sentimental, I guess. Experiences like that certainly can make people emotional in ways that they typically are not. And I think that's clear, and it's been a clear inflection point in his character.
People have told me he's a changed man since that assassination.
It seems like it.
attempt.
That was much more sentimental and sensitive than I think I've seen him in that sort of setting before, if that makes sense. I don't know if you agree.
I saw him at the Republican convention the first time. That was only about 48 hours, 72 hours out from the assassination attempt. He still had the bandage. And he was talking about it, and it was just this hushed awe in the room. And he himself, and I've never seen this, got a little bit choked up when he was talking about how, I was abrush with death. The guy behind me was killed, Corey Coppertone. And I think Trump was never a particularly religious man.
Yeah.
And you didn't really hear Trump talk about God too much in the first term, or in his time in the wilderness. And I really think he thinks about that now. He's older now too. God, not just as a talking point, but as something he really thinks about and believes about and feels deeply. It's something we see from him, and I think you see it in this inaugural address where he didn't just talk about God bless America like a talking point. He was, I was saved by God for this moment, and I think he really feels that deeply, no question.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty typical human reaction to close brushes with death, but certainly one that has more sweeping and wide implications because it's our former and now current president. So another thing that was definitely a moment that stuck with me was the Mars interstellar manifest destiny to the stars, and Elon's little there that they cut to immediately afterwards, which was funny.
It was incredible. I mean, that moment to me there was a few things I thought about. The first thing I thought about when I saw him talk about Mars was John F. Kennedy in his 1960 inaugural, where he said, we're going to go to the moon by the end of the decade. Mm-hmm. And we got there. Obviously, Kennedy didn't live to see it, but we got there in 1969. Trump is saying in his inauguration, we're going to go to Mars and put our flag down on Mars. And, he's basically issued a challenge to the American people, to SpaceX, to NASA, whoever else. This is an issue of national priority, and we need to do it. And Elon's reaction was just priceless. Elon, as you know, is a big Mars evangelist. Sometimes he's known as the King of Mars. He really wants the U.S. to get there. He wants a SpaceX rocket to bring us there. And I think when you see Trump talking about Mars, you really get a sense that that's Elon's influence. So. And I think it's great. It's America's dreaming big again. We're thinking about big things. Yeah. We're not just worried about potholes and the small stuff. If we're going to win in the world, the next frontier, the final frontier, is where we got to go.
Well, we're not winning in the world anymore. We're winning in
the
universe.
That's going to change.
Actually,
that's right.
We're winning in the universe.
We're going to make Mars great
You're
again.
Too small.
Exactly.
Another thing that stuck with me too. He wants to get rid of socially engineering race and gender into everything is something that he alluded to, and making America colorblind and merit-based.
It is Martin Luther King Day, Rikki.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely rhetoric that I appreciate, and I think a lot of Americans want to go back to that kind of neutrality. I think it's not. That doesn't sound like reactionary right anti-woke. That just sounds like going back to a centrist sort of neutral, hands off, what we should have been doing in the first place, sort of stuff, correction on the pendulum swinging too far.
Rikki,
which
it's
is a
Martin Luther
refreshing-
King Day.
Yeah, exactly.
What did
I
Martin
know.
Luther King tell us? What did he enjoin us all to do on this day?
Well,
Judge
colorblindness is
people
apparently
by the
actually very
content
racist.
of their character, not the color of
Of
their
course.
skin. And they hate when you
Absolutely.
bring this up.
I'm not fighting.
They
about that.
they
I
hate when you
agree.
bring this up because they never want to talk about that because it undermines all the stuff they want to do. But the fact of the matter is, that was Martin Luther King's message to the American people when he spoke on the National Mall. And, you know, I think President Trump saying that is a return to what Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement originally wanted. And there has been a growth of, I would call it woke segregation, where no, we're going to treat certain groups differently.
Yeah.
Because of historical issues or whatever, we have to have, you know, it's like almost an affirmative action regime, but for all walks of life. And that means the military. And you know, we can't, it's one thing to have that for like a florist or you know, a low stakes job. It's quite another when it's you know, our men and women in the military. And that's also, I know, a priority of Pete Hegseth, who, if he's confirmed, will become the next Secretary of Defense, to get out the woke indoctrination out of the military, because you know, you can't mess around with that. They're not doing, you know, critical gender analysis in China. I'll tell you that, Rikki.
This is true.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that I thought was interesting is the only standing ovation that I caught from Biden and Kamala, who were kind of sitting with their arms crossed for the majority of the speech,
Right.
Was when Trump did seem to allude to taking credit for the fact that the hostages were released in Israel, and to their credit, Biden and Kamala stood for that, but otherwise they seemed to be pretty dour.
Well, Biden obviously has tried and failed to get the hostages released for 15 months.
And it was Trump saying, "All hell's going to break loose."
Trump saying, "All hell's going to break loose," and then they're gone. Now, by the way, I should clarify, not all the hostages are being released. We've got, it's, I believe, 33 as part of the Phase 1 ceasefire that's going to last for 42 days. And then we will have this amorphous plan for a Phase 2 and a Phase 3 where all the hostages come out. But obviously it's a major breakthrough. If it all goes as planned, Israel's going to get back, I think, 33 hostages, some of which may actually be dead, but they'll get their bodies returned. And this is an achievement which eluded President Biden for over a year. And to me, it's a callback almost to the Reagan hostages, where Jimmy Carter is spending a year, more than a year, negotiating with the Iranians and begging and pleading. Much of his presidency was like that, and then the Ayatollah basically, you know, telling him to just, you know, F off, and then Reagan takes over and they're released, I believe, 5 minutes after he takes the oath of office or something like that. Incredible. And I think, you know, when you've got the real deal coming to town, there's a new sheriff in town, people, you don't want to mess with Trump internationally, or you might end up with 100% tariff. All right, so now we're going to toss, I think, to our politics editor who watched the speech in New York, Sam Chamberlain. He's a great man. And we're going to hear his analysis of what he thought of the speech. So I'm going to toss it over to Sam right now. And Sam's going to take it away.
Well, thanks, John and Rikki. My first thoughts on this speech, it was less an inaugural address than it was more of a State of the Union address. For one thing, it was almost twice as long as the first inaugural address Trump gave in 2017. That clocked in at 16 minutes. It was the shortest address at that time in 40 years since, who you were just talking about, John, Jimmy Carter gave his a similarly short speech in 1977. This speech clocked in at just under 30 minutes and touched on pretty much every topic under the sun. It sort of resembled a condensed version of all the speeches Trump gave on the campaign trail, every single topic he could think of. A lot of red meat for his base, a lot of stuff that would appeal to, you know, sort of soft Trump voters and independents who broke for him back in November. There's some stuff in there that Republicans are very eager for him to go full speed ahead on, especially getting the DEI ideology out of government, getting what he called the woke regime out of the military. But there are other things like removing the electric vehicle mandate that congressional Republicans may wish he had checked the brakes on, so they would have rather gone through reconciliation and removed the electric vehicle mandates. There was a lot of things in that speech that Trump wants to do by himself that might create some awkward moments for Republicans. But the other way that this was like a State of the Union address, and not just because it took place in the Capitol, was the sight of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris basically having to sit there and take it as now President Trump diagnosed a series of ills with the country, and they just had to sit there stone silent, sit on their hands, not applaud, not stand up at any point. And I think the most relieved man in Washington in a few minutes will be Joe Biden when he departs the east front of the Capitol in Marine One, but not before one final controversy from the Biden White House issuing a blanket pardon to 5 members of his family, including his brother James Biden. That is something that will be talked about long after the former Air Force One lands in Southern California this evening.
Right. I mean, all excellent points, Sam. All excellent points. I could tell Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were not enjoying themselves in that speech, and Bill Clinton was with his mouth open, looked stunned. So it was certainly something which I know Trump supporters will be watching this with a real sense of enjoyment. What do you think?
Certainly. I agree. I do think that it is a good point, too, that Sam made, that it did feel more like a State of the Union address. It did not feel quite as broad and grand, but possibly as like a typical inaugural address might. It's not just that sort of like, okay, here I am, and here's generally what I'm going to do. It's very specific and down to specific executive orders that he's like ready to do. Like it seems like he's just like going to kind of just hit the ground running.
I remember, it was a much more forward-looking and I feel frankly optimistic speech. Mm-hmm. You're talking about going to Mars. The first inaugural, I recall, it was famously the American Carnage speech, where it was a very like doom and gloom, and George W. Bush, who was there, famously looked over to Laura and said, what the F was that? Yeah. And that's a famous story from that speech. So I do think it's going to be a fundamentally different presidency, a fundamentally different approach. Yeah. It's the vision is much larger, and we'll see. We'll absolutely see.
We absolutely will. And since we've been chit-chatting here too, one thing that we've talked over was Carrie Underwood's song performance here, which is interesting because there's a lot of people getting flack for, and a lot of artists who seem to have associated themselves or not dissociated themselves with Trump post-election, who've gotten a lot of flack for it. Snoop Dogg did a performance at a crypto event for the inauguration and got a lot of backlash for that. It's interesting to see how there does seem to be like an Overton window that shifted in terms of the cultural acceptability to be around the right or around the MAGA world, although there is still that like cultural like subset of people that are still upset and are still ready to cancel Carrie for having sang today.
She's too big to cancel. You can't cancel Carrie.
Yeah, I suppose
there are the Barbara Streisands, there are the Roseannes. I'm sorry, not Roseanne. Rosie, Rosie O'Donnell. There are the Rosie O'Donnells. There are the Barbara Streisands who will always be in the peanut gallery calling for people to be canceled. But you said, Carrie Underwood is an institution. You can't just cancel Carrie Underwood. And I think, I remember in the old days, it was lonely out there with just Kid Rock was all you could get. Maybe Toby Keith, and that was it. Maybe Lee Greenwood. Now you're seeing a lot of mainstream stars sort of saying, okay, this is where the country is right now. I want to be where the country is. And I think that's a good thing. I think these, and a presidential inauguration should not be a partisan event, regardless of who it is. And it should be viewed as an honor to participate in any presidential inauguration, because this is one of the bedrocks of our country. And, politics is for the campaign. We can all fight and holler at each other. But this is a moment where, regardless of who wins, you see the former presidents are all here. It's a time we should be coming together, and having someone like Carrie Underwood, I think, really drives that home.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
This is Christopher Macchio, the singer. I didn't know his name earlier.
I don't know who that is. At first I thought that was, what's his name? The CNN guy. I don't know.
What?
I thought that was Cuomo.
You thought that was Chris Cuomo? That does not look like Chris Cuomo, Rikki.
I'm not sure why.
So what else do we talk about? Like, Panama Canal is also fascinating.
Yeah.
He spent a lot of time talking
about
about the Panama Canal.
And tariffs.
And I think those two issues are going to be linked.
Okay.
Because, okay, it's one thing to talk like, okay, the Panama Canal.
Yes.
We're gonna be bringing back American sovereignty over the canal. We're gonna take it back, in his words. But I mean, how do you really do that? And I think tariffs, which you talked about a lot too, setting up the external revenue service to take in the tariff money. I think tariffs will play a big role because it'll be, okay, you don't want to do what we want. How about a 20% tariff? How about an 80% tariff?
Yeah.
And such a tariff imposed on Panama, we really wouldn't feel it, but it would be devastating to their economies. And it's a muscular foreign policy that we really haven't seen in America in our lifetimes, and really possibly in 100 years or more.
Yeah. And it's kind of impossible to predict, though, how that. I mean, he has threatened several times that could have implications for China, and what that would mean for the American consumer could be potentially actually hit home in a much more severe way.
That's one of the things that we're going to have to negotiate, because tariffs are obviously a two-way street.
Of course.
You can put tariffs on a country, they can put tariffs on you. That doesn't matter much for Panama necessarily, because we have a much larger balance of trade with them. But it will matter for a country like China. And famously, in the first term, they put a lot of tariffs on our imports, and we had to subsidize American farmers for a very long time with payments, because it's for a country like China, they can take a bite out of us too. And it's, in many ways, tariffs are a contest of wills. It's not good for either country, but there needs to be some sort of consensus. Because look, China's already put tariffs on a lot of our products. The Chinese are already, we're talking about, should we allow TikTok? Should we not allow TikTok? They don't allow Facebook. They don't allow Instagram. They don't allow Gmail or Google. They block many of our, iconic institutional, websites and companies. And we, so one of the things I would certainly hope for is, if we're going to allow TikTok back, what are the Chinese going to allow us in their country? Will we get to have Facebook in China? It's a bit of leverage that I think we are in a position to exert if we wanted to, in addition to the tariffs.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the fact that she was invited to the inauguration was at least an indication of good faith. But let's roll to a few highlights from this address so far. He alluded to the revolution of common sense being an aspect of his tenure. So let's hear that.
Let's go to the revolution of common sense.
Today I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense.
Is it back to us?
It's playing, but you guys can't hear it, obviously. You can put the volume on.
It's fine. I heard it already.
No, I'm not.
I just need to know when we're back.
I mean, a revolution of common sense is, one of the most devastating campaign issues for Kamala Harris was when she signed that ACLU survey saying the government should pay for gender reassignment surgeries for prison inmates, for criminals, which I think when Trump talks about the revolution of common sense, for illegal aliens incarcerated who are in prison. That's what it was.
That was
like
the next level.
That's crazy. Yes. I mean, it's already crazy to be taking, a 16-year-old girl and, shoving her full of testosterone, and when she doesn't, have the power to consent.
12-year-olds on puberty blockers.
Right, 12-year-olds on puberty blockers. This is already crazy, but that's like the next level.
Yeah.
And it's like every, part of the problem with Democrats, I think, in the last 10 years, they just can't say no to anything. Yeah. Whatever the activists or the academics or the nonprofits come up with, it's like, yeah, let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. There's just no one in the party anymore who can act as a brake pedal to be like, guys, whoa. And increasingly, they're just in these information bubbles. And so, like Trump is saying, like, let's stop doing the stupid stuff. And it's as a Supreme Court justice would once say, you know it when you see it. And that was certainly true with the trans survey that Kamala signed that she really did her best to run away from. And that's true for many other issues that we now classify as woke issues, and it's something we're probably going to see reversed very, very, very quickly.
And another clip that we pulled as well, his orders when it comes to migration and immigration.
All illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release. And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country.
Well, I think this is certainly the most ambitious aspect of his beginning of his presidency here. I mean, the numbers and figures that he's tossed out there in terms of the deportations that he plans are astounding. Do you think that they're practical? Do you think they're actually going to come to fruition in the way that he's been projecting?
You know, J.D. Vance was famously asked about this. You know, so there's 20 million illegal migrants in the United States. What are you going to do? How do you do it all? And I think he said, you know, look, you focus on, say, you start with the criminals. You start with the people who have violent criminal records. People that, like in New York City, we won't hand over to ICE right now because we give them sanctuary city. People like that person that lit that poor woman on fire in the subway. People like the person who's starting wildfires in California. Let's start with the easy ones. You know, it's not going to be, you know, your sweet grandmother. It's going to be the criminal migrants. And as we know, ICE said there's 15,000 migrants convicted of homicide in their home country in the United States right now, and we don't even know where they all are. Let's start with the easy cases, and then you go up from there. And the fact of the matter is, if I break into your home, Rikki, and I refuse to leave, and I demand that you give me a credit card and food and shelter and all the rest of it, you know, I don't know that I'd call that a migrant. I have another word for that. And you know, these are people who broke the law. And you know, if we're going to be a country, we have to have a country of laws and a system of laws. And it undermines the people who wait in line and come here legally when you just, you know, have no border and it's just a free-for-all. And something else that I can tell you is amnesty, which was a sort of sacrosanct article of faith on the Democratic side, is off the table. You don't see any calls from Democrats that the tough border enforcement be paired with some kind of amnesty for who is already here. So there has been a major shift in the conversation that I think you have to credit to President Trump.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, I think that this might kind of conclude our time here. What is your kind of overall take on the vibe of the day? Positive?
I will tell you, the
or
Democrats here are not happy at all, and they definitely don't want to be here. But I think it's the vibe is more than just what you see, you know, on the stage at the Capitol Rotunda. The vibe is what's in D.C. and it's around the country. And the polls show, I think the vibe is totally changed. So, you know, we're gonna do something crazy right now. We're gonna do something a little radical right now. We're gonna try to call the president. He's on his way. He's in the limo, I think, maybe going to the Capitol Arena. So maybe he'll answer. I don't know if he'll answer, but you know what? We live in a great country, so let's call him up.
I'm thinking his ringer might not be on.
We don't know. It might not be on.
Feels like an important day.
I'm holding it to the mic in case he answers so you could hear it.
Please leave your name, number.
No answer. We tried.
Sound like him somehow.
Amazing. Well, we tried. It would have been fun. So is there anything else, Rikki? What else we got?
Yeah, I mean, I think my overall take on it was a measured, specific, and very ambitious speech. Like it was a very pointed and driven kind of setting out my plan rather than just a fluffy, here I am and thanks for the votes sort of
there is.
address.
You're totally right. There's a real agenda that has been set forth.
Absolutely.
It's not just a campaign speech anymore. He is now the president of the United States.
He feels like he's got a job.
And we're gonna see. But I can tell you we're all in for a ride.
I think it'll be an effective 4 years. That's my sense of the day. So, yeah.
Time will tell.
Well, it's been fun to analyze this with you.
So I think we're going to close now.
Yeah.
It's been great to be with you all. Once again, this has been Rikki Schlott and John Levine with New York Post live coverage of President Trump's inauguration here in D.C. Thank you for joining us. We hope you had a good time, and we'll catch you at the next one.